Lucy, Martha, and Benjamin, three siblings, are having what seems like a fun road trip. They talk about ordinary stuff, but the expression on Lucy's face makes it obvious that nothing ordinary is going on inside her mind. Soon, we will learn that this is not a mere road trip either. Their final destination is a protest. As we learn from their friend named Agatha, they are protesting the government's decision to execute a mentally disabled man. The demonstration is taking place near the jail where the man was captured. The protest is peaceful but rigorous. That day, Lucy notices a military official as he goes through the demonstration. A girl in a green dress, seemingly his daughter, is by his side. That night, Lucy comes down from the RV to have a smoke when suddenly, this girl comes up to her from behind. She introduces herself as Mercy and shows a friendly attitude, but Lucy chooses not to play along. In the brief conversation that follows, it becomes increasingly obvious that the duo are on opposing sides. The man seems to have murdered Mercy's father's partner of 16 years. She seeks revenge and justice, while Lucy is against execution. What else is her motive? We do not yet know. The next day, after half a day of continuing protests, the family drive back home, and the conversations about ordinary things resume. Martha thinks Lucy needs a job. Returning to her ordinary life, the picture of the girl she met keeps reappearing in her mind. For some reason, Lucy feels an urge to look her up on the internet, but she finds nothing special. Preparing for a job interview later that morning, Martha lends her shoes. The morning conversations around the house are filled with requests. Unfortunately, everybody seems to want something from another. Martha's shoes turn out to be too big for Lucy. This is why she arrives for the job interview barefoot. While speaking with her friend Toby, who's behind the counter, she emphasizes how hopeless her employment situation is. Once Toby goes to pour her a drink, a person named Catelyn comes up to Lucy. A fake smile is stretched across her face as she tries to ruin her day for no particular reason. She reminds Lucy of a distant day and tells her that she has never told anyone how much of a pervert she is before walking away. Catelyn brings Lucy's father into the conversation as well, but the context of the latter is yet unknown to us. In the next scene, everything becomes clear for us. There is an attorney named Weldon at their house who has come with some news. As it turns out, Lucy's father is awaiting execution too. According to the most recent order, he is going to be executed in 4 months, so the attorney has to be quick. As he tries to prove it, he has something very good to work with, but Lucy doesn't believe him. Whatever he has won't possibly prove that her father is innocent. The almost grotesque, self-satisfied look on his face makes her extremely mad. Lucy is enraged and hopeless. In 2 weeks, the family sit in the RV again and drive to jail. The people at the protest, especially the one named Agatha, are already good friends with Lucy. Walking around the campsite, she comes up to Mercy as well. The degree to which she's open about her political stance is quite annoying. Still, after a brief back and forth, she invites herself into Lucy's RV. Once alone, they realize very soon that they have nothing to talk about. Unable to make even the simplest small talk, Mercy decides to get back. Before going down, she invites Lucy to have a walk around in the town later and grab a real drink. Knowing they are on opposing sides, Lucy doesn't show much enthusiasm in response to this offer, but she still agrees to go. That evening, she maintains a cheerful attitude around her siblings and tells them that she's probably going to be out late. Martha shoots a mistrustful gaze at first, but she doesn't question her younger sister too much. Once Lucy comes down from her RV, she is spooked by Mercy again. The latter seems to like scaring people like this. On their way to a bar, they speak briefly about their personal lives. Lucy is single, while Mercy seems to be in between boyfriends. Her profession is the one that Lucy particularly despises. She's a lawyer, a junior one, but still a lawyer. While discussing their motives in a local bar, Mercy emphasizes how glad she is that the capital penalty exists. It gives people a chance to have their vengeance and move on. Here, she gets interested in Lucy's situation as well, but the girl only shares a small portion of it. She says that her mother is gone, but says nothing of her father. Mercy thinks that Lucy is a kind of interesting person who, for sure, has a sad story. She also realizes that her father has something to do with the gloom on her face. So once Lucy gets properly boozed up, Mercy pops the question. The story that she hears is soul-shaking. Lucy remembers how, 8 years ago, she came home from a friend's house and found her mother murdered. Her father was supposed to be out of town that day, but a few blocks away, someone noticed a guy that looked like him throw a weapon in a bush. This is the only evidence that they have against her father, but the man himself denies that he did it. The fact that Lucy and her siblings believe him makes their situation that much worse. The entire dreadfulness of their being includes the law they cannot afford as well. When Lucy turns to explaining the ways in which Martha tries to keep him by their side, Lucy's voice finally cracks, and she starts sobbing uncontrollably. In the light of everything she shared, the protests that they attend seem like a tragically hopeless means of fighting. While embracing her, Mercy is struck by the story. She kisses her forehead gently, and trying to share some warmth and peace, she comes down to her lips. Lucy seems a little relieved in her arms. That night, while going to bed, a flickering smile is noticeable on her face. The next afternoon, after participating in 2 opposing protests, the two meet one another. After a very brief conversation, Mercy emphasizes that she has to rejoin the others and leave this place. Before walking away, she notices Lucy rupture her hairband and gives her one of her own. She will be thinking about her. Lucy visits her father, Simon, in jail in the next scene. In their conversation, one main conflict begins to emerge. As it turns out, Simon believes that the lawyer's news is positive as well. Lucy knows that Weldon's testimony will only prove that Simon murdered his wife while she was high. This will perhaps put her father out of jail, but it won't prove that he's innocent. Seeing Simon agree to admit murdering only to save his life troubles Lucy a lot. She wants him to fight for the truth, even if there is a little chance of survival down that road. The rest of the conversation between the father and the daughter is ordinary and soulless. In the next scene, after trying to find joy in simple life scenarios, Lucy suddenly receives a video call from Mercy. The kitchen behind her is a mess, so almost in a state of panic, she starts tidying it up anxiously. After answering the call, Lucy is super awkward. Her breathing is rapid, and she shoots words before she can think about them in her mind. Still, the moment isn't embarrassing. It still fits within the frame of hilarity when Ben comes in and demands the laptop. He needs to play World of Warcraft so badly that he is ready to fight for it by any means. Thankfully, Lucy manages to outrun him and lock herself in her room. This is when Mercy tells her about truly good news. Her law firm seems to be working with a lab in Chicago that works with new technologies that use a different type of chemical process. Thanks to this, they can analyze evidence that has already been analyzed and find new clues that previous technologies might have missed. Lucy is speechless. This means that her father's absence can finally be proven. She has no idea how to thank her. Later that evening, while speaking with her older sister, Lucy's expressions make us wonder if she might not be so sure about her father's innocence anymore. She tries not to show it, but the glimpse of mistrust is somehow still noticeable in her tone. The next place that they want to go is Missouri, but some circumstances arise that force Lucy to stay. Ben gets sick, and somebody must stay home to take care of him. Lucy tries to prove that she can go to the protest alone, but Martha doesn't trust her that much yet. Martha's cold attitude and seemingly impregnable opinion are not enough to make Lucy stay. However, in the next scene, she sneaks into the RV and drives away without consulting anyone about it. Now it's just her, the RV, and the road. Within the commotions of the protest in the next scene, she catches a glimpse of Mercy, and as a wide smile stretches itself across her face, she starts pacing towards her. Right away, they embrace one another firmly. Soon, they leave the area of demonstration and head over to someplace much quieter. On a mountain near a river, Lucy rests her head on Mercy's skirt when, unexpectedly, one of the core memories starts emerging on the surface of her imagination. She thinks it is a little silly, but she still decides to share it with Mercy. As it turns out, Lucy used to go fishing with her dad quite often. Once, her mother and Martha joined in as well, and from the bushes, the sisters noticed their parents kissing. This only happened once, but as Lucy says, she feels as if it was a regular thing. It is weird how memory works. That night, Lucy offers her to stay and sleep in her RV, but Mercy says that she should get back. Before she does so, however, she takes one more sip of her beer and starts telling a story. She seems to have met with the mother of a murdered victim once. The woman was shattered into pieces. Her body was like a husk that stored nothing but bleak nothingness. Mercy wonders now if it is possible for anybody to come back from that psychological condition. From her experience, the execution of the murdered lifted off an enormous load from her parents' shoulders. And this is the kind of relief she wants Lucy to feel as well. Lucy takes her point differently. What she hears is that, from Mercy's perspective, executing Simon will solve her grief. And naturally, this point makes her extremely mad. As she starts expressing infuriation, Mercy begins explaining that she meant something else. But there is no use. Lucy wants her out of the RV immediately. When Agatha appears at her door the next morning, Lucy doesn't get out of bed to let her in. Drawn by her growing desperation, she remains alone until Mercy enters the RV uninvited. She sees Lucy frowning and exhausted. Bitterly, she points out that even though nobody knows for sure that Simon didn't do it, they don't have a right to give him a lethal injection, seeing her overall state. Mercy unexpectedly gives herself permission to get behind the wheel and drive Lucy home. The latter doesn't fight back at all. Throughout the road trip, Lucy gradually gets better. Soon, the gloom of the last night evaporates, and the duo engage in simple, ordinary road trip games to pass time. Weirdly enough, these cheerful and silly games relieve both Mercy and Lucy and force them to get to know each other better. That night, Mercy finally starts asking her questions about her personal life and gets amazed by how dry and scarce it is. As it turns out, Lucy has only had a couple unimportant, brief relationships with boys that she didn't love at all. This isn't the end of the story. However, what puts Mercy aback even more is that Lucy hasn't had sex in more than 2 years. The girl herself starts feeling a little embarrassed as Mercy continues to express her concern jokingly. An hour or two passes then, and suddenly, when it's Lucy's turn to drive, Mercy hears her song on the radio and tells her reactively to pull over. Once the RV is stopped, she dashes behind and starts dancing. Once she forces Lucy to join her, we see a difference between them. Mercy's moves are free, while Lucy's dance seems shackled and rigid. Unexpectedly, Mercy gives her a brief kiss, and this small show of affection quickly turns into a fuming passion. After Lucy hurriedly turns off the RV engine, the two get undressed and start setting off their fires in bed. Once they arrive at Lucy's home, their relationship changes. Once they enter the living room, Mercy asks her about the details of the murder. Gradually, she starts learning more and more about the incident. As it turns out, it wasn't a break-in. The door was either opened by the murderer or he had a key. The crime was committed by a kitchen knife. Jewelry was stolen too, but it was found alongside the knife in the bushes. Suddenly, as Lucy remembers the details and Mercy asks for more, another person enters the living room. It is Martha, with an underlying hostility, who paints a very clear picture of the murder. This is how you would have seen it if you were there during the incident. There is a knock on the door. The woman opens it and is suddenly knocked down by the man, who reactively dashes upstairs. Instead of running outside, the woman grabs a kitchen knife and follows him upstairs, because she knows that her son is sleeping in a crib up there. When the man sees her, he fights, gets the knife off of her, and stabs her several times with it until he runs away and, eaten alive by guilt, throws everything away. After finishing the story, Mercy has no more questions to ask. Everything makes perfect sense. Before going upstairs again, Martha scolds her younger sister for running away so irresponsibly and tells her to take care of Ben tomorrow. In the next scene, we learn that Mercy views Martha's version of the story with a touch of mistrust. She isn't so sure that her logical chain is absolutely unbreakable, and surprisingly, Lucy seems to share her doubt as well. She fails to go out of her way and argue against Mercy's skepticism, because, deep down, she agrees that the murder story is drowning in mystery. A passionate night blooms out of this sorrowful episode, and then until the next morning, all the despair is taken away from Lucy's face. Her expressions are now bright, as if there were no worry in her world. After a lot of cuddling and grappling, Mercy finally manages to get out of bed and meet Benjamin. The little boy looks at her quietly, and with a glimpse of mistrust. One might call his attitude a little impolite, but he still has justification. He's so sick that he just threw up in the hallway. After Mercy's departure, Lucy knows that it is her job to clean up after Ben, but the last night was so fulfilling for her that the future task doesn't bother her at all. Later that day, Lucy and Mercy plan their next get-together while having a video call. The next protest they are going to go to is in Georgia. In the next scene, Martha is out with Ben when Lucy hears a doorbell. Walking up to the entrance, she sees a face that immediately changes her positive mood. Weldon is coming in with some news about the case. Before and after coming in, he asks too many questions about Martha's whereabouts. It is obvious how insecure he is about himself and his relationship with Martha. In a way, he knows that he is not truly liked by her, but he still doesn't want her to see other men. Seeing the bitter and judging look on Martha's face, he defends himself by emphasizing that Martha was the one starting this kind of relationship with him. Here, Weldon proves what a resentful person he is. Before sharing the news about the case, he points out that he always thought Simon had done it. In his head, he was protecting the murderer, but he never cared. Weldon clearly says this only to upset Lucy. This is especially true in light of the news he's about to break. As it turns out, the tests in Chicago prove that a hair found at the crime scene belongs to a known criminal. If some more tests are conducted, their father's innocence will most likely be proven. This is wonderful news, but Weldon seems to be planning to use his position perversely. Instead of promising anything, he says that Martha should call him up. On her way to Georgia, Lucy is in a great mood in the following scene. Once they are at a protesters' camp, she checks that Ben is properly occupied and spends some private time with Mercy. Setting out the flames, they seem to be immersed in a strictly sexual relationship. But there is much more to their bond than simple primal passion. Getting back home, Ben hurts his leg. It is when Lucy cleans his wound that the young man comes out of his shell for the first time. His silence and seemingly careless, indifferent attitude have always seemed a little off. And finally, we get a glimpse of what's going on in his mind. Sharing his confused thoughts, he asks Lucy if the father will want him to move out once he comes out of prison. Lucy is speechless. This question is so baseless that she has no idea where it came from. The youngster explains his logic then. As it turns out, Simon never wanted him to visit the prison. So Ben gradually began to think that his father disliked and rejected him. Now that Simon's release is close, the fear in the kid's mind is as powerful as ever. Lucy wants to make him feel better, but all she can do is relieve the tension by making a joke out of it all. Perhaps she knows that what Ben fears is not that far from reality. Looking for a needle and a thread to stitch up his trousers in the next scene, Lucy comes up with a sewing guidebook that her mother used to own. The smell of paper and the writing on it awakened memories in her mind that were lost to her consciousness until this moment. The next evening, after approaching the front door, Lucy finds Ben playing outside and immediately understands and gets a bad feeling. Coming up to the young man, she learns that Martha and Weldon are discussing something important inside. Dashing inside, she notices them standing grievingly in the kitchen. It is clear that this time, Weldon has come with terrible news. After a dark silence that stretches over eternities, the news is shared with Lucy as well. The guy whose hair they found seems to have been only a moving guy. There are witnesses to prove his innocence, while new tests found a drop of his mother's blood on Simon's shirt. There is no question about it now. When the party of three disintegrates and Weldon storms out, Lucy tries to share some warmth with Martha. Trying to make her feel better, she realizes that her older sister still believes her father is innocent. It is clear to Lucy now that Martha is obsessed. Blindly, and with a completely fogged mind, she's been leading her on this dark and hopeless path since she was 14, and frankly, Lucy is tired. It is extremely tough for her to say it, but after a few seconds of heartbreaking struggle, she manages to articulate that she thinks Simon is guilty. The futile fate of his innocence has destroyed her life, and she feels it's finally time to let go. And even though her soul is almost blinded by pain, she knows that it's necessary. The same cannot be said about Martha, though. In the face of her own obsession, she finds herself alone. Lucy, on the other hand, is as lost as ever. Her life as she knew it now turned upside down. Faith that has been fulfilling her existence is now gone, and finding herself slowly fading in desperation, she can think of nothing else but going to Mercy. That night, she drives to her house and rings the bell without informing her in advance. The door is opened by Mercy's mother, Alice. An awkward silence falls, as no one really understands why a stranger is suddenly sitting at their dinner table. The father recognizes Lucy. He knows that she's from the other side of the protests. Before any kind of disagreement can take place, Mercy enters the room, and, struck by seeing Lucy, she freezes in one place for a moment. Clearly, she is not that happy to see her so unexpectedly. Coming back to her senses after a few seconds, she introduces everybody, including Ian, her boss. When she addresses him as her boss, a laugh goes around the table. The mother points out how comically formal her daughter's introduction was, and adds that Mercy and Ian have a very close relationship. Mercy has been clearly hiding something from Lucy this whole time. Once a couple of awkward conversations are made, Mercy asks Lucy for a private word and leads her outside the dining room. Lucy is extremely disappointed. She has come here seeking comfort and is left with nothing but more bitter news. Mercy, on the other hand, feels intruded. This is her private life, and Lucy has no right to meddle in it whenever she wants to. Unfortunately, the conflict between them isn't resolved, and Lucy sneaks out of the house to return to her RV. Coming back home, she joins Martha in bed and holds her hand throughout the night. The next morning, the girls go to Simon and break the news to him. While listening to his last speech, Martha realizes that he's about to admit the truth and gets a feeling that she cannot handle it. Smashing the phone back to its place, she dashes outside and leaves the man to his truth. Lucy follows after her in silence. Once the girls get back home, their conversation takes on an unusually calm and careless tone. It seems as if the tragedy and their lives are finally behind them. Suddenly, Martha jumps up from bed and announces to gather around the table in the living room. Opening up a map of the United States, she proposes to pick out any place and move out of there. All explode in excitement, and thinking of their new life in California, they celebrate this life-changing decision. Before this enormous transition can take place, however, the siblings have to go through one last tragic experience. In the next scene, the black-clad trio approach the jail when they catch a glimpse of Mercy standing by the entrance. As she tells Lucy, she has come to be here by her side. All except Benjamin enter the facility, and, after walking through cold hallways, end up in a room from which the execution is spectated, as curtains are thrown away behind thick transparent glass. Lucy, Mercy, Martha, the priest, and a few officers watch as Simon's body slowly becomes visible. The expression on his face lets out fear as a deadly substance goes through his veins. Gazing at his children, he sees girls going through hell. Once his eyes are closed, and the doctor notes the time of his passing, morning begins, and the sisters embrace one another in tears. They continue to be entangled once they come out of the facility as well, until Martha sees Ben and dashes in his direction. Embracing her little brother, she expresses her love as silent protesters watch the scene grievingly. Benjamin asks if Simon said anything about him then, and seeing how important it is for him, Martha says that he said he was sorry. Nothing important is said between Lucy and Mercy. Gratitude is expressed, but the conflict isn't resolved. The dark clothes are taken off immediately as the siblings get back home. In the next scene, we pick up the story after 6 months. Lucy is now working in a cafe in California when she suddenly sees Mercy outside. Once they get outside to speak, Mercy tells her that she quit her job and broke up with Ian. She left everything and came to her in the hope that she would have her back. Now fully committed, she says that she's sorry and tries to make an ordinary confession. A raging war begins in Lucy's mind. Clearly, the love she felt for her hasn't vanished. She wants her back. But the other side of her mind is rigorously trying to prove that one cannot show up in another's life like this. Mercy understands this. This is why she doesn't argue back when Lucy rejects her. After the last embrace, the girl attempts to get back to work, but finds herself drawn back by some irresistible force. Her entire organism is now urging her to accept Lucy, and thankfully, she decides to surrender to this meaningful gravity.